Excellent. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us here for this presentation on finding creativity in uncertain times. I'm Nick Harauz, and just above me on my screen is Ian Robinson. Again, this is the second time we've actually presented together, believe it or not, after knowing each other for over probably 10 plus years now. So
Yeah,
it's
man,
great to be here with you and share the stage at the Creativity Conference, and this awesome conference, and sharing some of the things that we've learned along the way. So this is a session about finding creativity, not in 2021 necessarily, but just finding creativity in general. And what we're hoping to cover today is sharing some of our struggles, insights that we've learned as creatives throughout, in my case, 20 plus years working in video editing, motion graphics, as well as creating my own forms of content in various mediums. With that said, these insights that we are sharing with you are in no particular order. I don't have an insight that I feel is stronger than others per se. And with that said, we hope that each of you walks away with one thing that may challenge, inspire you, or push your creativity a little bit forward. So if that sounds good, awesome. And shall we get started, Ian?
Yeah, man, let's do this.
Okay. So I think because the title is called Finding Creativity in Uncertain Times, it's important to define uncertainty. And when I went online to check out the definition, this is the first thing that came up from the Cambridge's dictionary, which was the quality or state of being uncertain, which didn't really help with the uncertainty of the title. But the one thing that struck out to me was the word doubt in capital letters, and how doubt plays a role in uncertainty. We can take to another dictionary, the Oxford Dictionary, where they're defining uncertainty as a situation in which something is not yet known. And I think if we consider the word doubt and the idea of things not being known, this can lead to feelings that we may have that could affect the way that we create. And Ian, you actually said this to me on an offline conversation we had before our presentation, which was how even the idea of anxiety plays a role when it comes to creativity and uncertainty, and how anxiety might find its way in from that feeling of uncertainty that all of us have been through at some point in our lives, if not very recently.
Totally. I mean, for me personally, it's something that I consistently battle, along with some other things that we will definitely talk about. But especially now in these crazy times with all the stuff that's going on in the world, it seems like for me, a lot of dealing with uncertainty is actually dealing with the anxiety that it creates. So hopefully, as we continue on here, we'll give you some tools that you can use to kind of quell some of those feelings and really push yourself forwards.
That, and to add to this thought, when I think about uncertainty and I continue to look at the definition, it does feel somewhat normal in a sense, as in a situation is not yet known. The idea of doubt, I personally, is something that plays a role with me on a daily basis. And I find that there's something about taking that word uncertainty and, may I dare use the word, humanize it, or understand that it's a natural occurrence, and how treating it as a natural occurrence can allow us to action certain things through creativity. Now, with that said, my research when it came to uncertainty and creativity led me back to a poem, one of my favorite poems when I was younger. How many of you, and feel free to enter into the chat, have heard of The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost? Okay. And out of those, I'm just going to check my chat window here in a second. So I just have to minimize my screen so I can see that a bit better. I was curious, what is the definition that you've drawn from this poem? Anyone?
I think you might need to jump in there, Nick.
Oh, in terms of, yeah, I will totally jump in a second. In terms of the definition itself, that the one difficult road can lead to the best one, taking a different path than what is considered the norm. And this is the thing that when I was in school, in grade school, this is what I was taught. This is the idea that was presented to me, that going away from the traditional road, taking the riskier path, um, that road less traveled is the one that makes all the difference. And I stumbled recently across a PBS short documentary where a number of scholars have now challenged the definition of this poem and started to look at Robert Frost's true meaning for intention for the poem, and the fact that it wasn't actually taking the more risky path, the road not taken. The fact is that he wrote the poem for an English poet by the name of Edward Thomas. And when Robert Frost was in England for a number of years, him and Edward Thomas would go on a number of different paths. So they would walk together in nature, and then during their walks, they would have to decide which path to take. Now, at the end of each of the times that they had to decide, the funny thing is Edward Thomas would never be happy with the decision of the path they chose. He would always feel like there was another experience on the other path that they had missed, and complained a lot to Robert Frost. And Robert Frost took amusement to this, and in fact, that he wrote the poem for this reason. And if you start to look at the middle of the poem, it actually talks not really so much about the road less traveled, but how these paths are equally the same. In fact, the idea is that it doesn't matter which path you take. And I find that to be so ironic in the way that we might look at this poem and how this is now being challenged today. Okay, so let's start with some insights now that we've defined creativity and sort of looked at the idea of the road not taken, this path. One thing I want to bring up is, through my own experience, is in creativity, don't believe everything that you think. You know, the conversations that we have with ourselves about ourselves are not necessarily always who we are. And in fact, I would say that when we start to think about this, bear with me 1 second, I just have to rearrange my screen, that our self-talk to ourselves is usually the most critical reviewer out there. In fact, basically worse than our worst imagined client, so to speak. You know, the way that we talk to ourselves about creativity, or might think about creativity, could impact the way that we action creativity. And Ian, I was curious, have you ever been critical in terms of yourself and your own self-talk on your creative
Every
journey?
day, all the time. To tell you the truth, recently I've had a very large project that I've been really pushing through. And the biggest battle has been just my not being satisfied with any of it. And it goes right back to the poem. You know, it didn't matter which path I took, I just wasn't satisfied. And then finally, I actually did some meditation and talked to a dear friend of mine who I've known since I was in high school. And they reminded me that, you know, there's a reason I ended up on this path, and there's a reason that I've been asked to do this job. And I was able to step back and actually reframe it. And like Jay said in the chat, you know, the path you take is the path you take. So what I like about that is it really kind of pushes me in the sense that as long as you are moving forward, you're taking the right path. And if you can kind of squash that inner dialogue, if you have doubts about what's going on, you know, just take comfort in the fact that you're actually moving forward, because that is the process.
Yeah. And I think it's, to draw on this, it's important to pay close attention to how we communicate with ourselves, but also how we communicate with ourselves when it comes to how we create. My wife, who's a life coach, is always sometimes challenges me in how I talk about creativity, and how sometimes I've expressed this idea of it being a battle, or, you know, today is going to be the absolute worst, and how that self-talk could lead to expectation, um, and even anticipation that doesn't even happen. So that, I think, awareness of how you communicate with yourself and how you communicate with your others when it comes to creativity is really important. And to always note that how you talk about yourself is not always necessarily who you are. This leads me to another point, which is, creativity is an action sport. Jay, thank you for coming to our presentation. I've known Jay for a number of years, and so has Ian. And we've had several conversations about this, is that creativity itself involves taking action and taking steps. And in fact, for those of you who are here, I want you to take a moment. In a little while, what we're going to do is ask you guys some questions. We want to make the best use of your time. So if you have a pen and a paper by you, or just a little notepad, just grab that in the background. In about 5 or 6 minutes, we're going to go through this creative questionnaire. But taking action or being involved in this action, I think, is really important. And Ian, you have this awesome tip.
Yeah, I mean, a number of years ago, I had been working like most creatives nonstop. And I was kind of burning the candle at both ends, and I was several tens of pounds overweight. And I realized that, exercise was a fundamental thing to actually kind of get my creative mojo back. So rather than just saying, oh yeah, we need to exercise more, I took some time to actually look up the reasons behind how it helps. And so as you can see with this one, the benefits of exercise come directly from its ability to reduce insulin resistance, inflammation, and stimulate the release of growth factors, chemicals in the brain that affect the health of the brain cells, the growth of new blood vessels in the brain, and even the abundance and survival of new brain cells. So literally, if you're stuck, just the act of getting up and walking or hiking, I know, Jay, you've definitely been taking walks, and I know I've been taking hikes. If any of you follow me on Instagram, it's hike picture after hike picture after hike picture. So yeah, exercise, really key. Just get up and step away from the desk. Many studies have suggested that the parts of the brain that control thinking and memory, specifically the prefrontal cortex and the medial temporal cortex, have greater volume in people who exercise versus people who don't. So you're not only building muscles in your legs, but you're actually building brain cells and brain matter. And that's really important when you're trying to be creative. So yeah, another thing that has been a challenge, especially when I was living closer in the city, I had a daily routine. So a daily routine is wonderful in the sense that you have a sense of purpose and you know exactly what's coming. But the problem is habits can actually allow your brain to kind of go on autopilot. When it does that, it actually tries to use less of your brain. So changing your habits will actually help create new neural pathways. So one thing I started doing when I was a kid was actually trying to write my name with my left hand. And just doing that made a big difference. Honestly, when I drive to the grocery store, let's say I go to Target, I used to always park in the same area of the parking lot because I was paranoid about people dinging my car or whatever. But honestly, now I have like 3 or 4 places that I go to, and I just try and park in different places every single time. And I know it sounds silly, but honestly, just doing these little things helps your brain get out of the autopilot thing. So when you actually get back to your computer or notepad or pen or paper or whatever you're using to be creative, you can actually break out of that rut. So of course, new neural pathways help increase neural plasticity for sure.
Cool. And this leads me to kind of that moment where I told you guys to grab a pencil or a pen and paper. And the ultimate question is, have you checked in on your own creativity recently? When was the last time you did a creativity health checkup? So sometimes in this fast-paced world, especially if we're working for, if we're a freelancer and we're working for multiple different departments or producing work for, or even working a 9-to-5 job, we have probably creativity being expressed through different outlets, but not necessarily our overall creativity, and could even lose track of why we began to create in the first place. So I have a questionnaire for you guys. And this questionnaire is a mixture of questions from a book called Let the Elephants Run from David Usher. He's a Canadian musician, as well as some of my own where it comes to creativity and how you view it. So let's begin. That's what that pen and paper is for. This is for you to keep, of course, and walk away with in terms of your own creative checkup. So I'm going to start with the first question here, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your creativity?
Just take a second and write it down, because again, even just the act of writing is something that'll help you create new neural pathways if it's not something that you usually do on the regular.
Now, when you were a kid, what was that creativity in terms of 1 to 10?
Yeah, Nick, do you feel like yours has gotten more or less creative as you've gotten older?
I would say, Ian, less creative in some areas for sure. Uh, I would say sometimes I feel like it could be even more creative, especially
Sure.
when I try to tap into that um, inner creativity that I learned about. When was the last thing you tried something new? When was the last time you parked somewhere new, Ian, in the supermarket?
Yeah, that's right. Thankfully, I haven't been going too often, but yeah, definitely the last time for sure.
Why do you create? I create because, and just take a moment to write down that sentence.
Yeah, I mean, I personally create for a number of different reasons. I know, musically, I used to create because it was an emotional outlet. Writing was a great way to create. Again, it was just another way to kind of look at things and reframe what was going on in my head. So, think about all the different things. It doesn't have to be your main field of focus. It could be anything.
Yeah. How often do you check in on your creative goals? Are you doing a check daily, weekly, monthly, when there's time? Because there's never time. What's the answer in terms of creative goal checkups? And when was the last creative project that you completed? So we can define this creative project. Let's call it a project for you and not for someone else.
Yeah, and completed is the operative word, honestly,
Yeah.
for me. I don't know for most other people, but I definitely have a tendency to start the creative process and then leave it for an extended period of time.
And how do you consider that creative work that if you did complete it, is it a success, failure? And then what activities do you do creatively? I wrote down a few that I consider creative, but there could be other different things as well. Do you write, draw, read, blog, photograph? Jay, you were mentioning earlier in the chat about walking and its influence in terms of creativity. Maybe walking is a creative act for you just based on what you observe when you go out on your walks. Now, how do you collect what inspires you? Just have to do a little rejig there with my screen one more time. Do you make room for fun in creativity? This is something that I am trying to do more of. It's one of my goals in 2021 to have fun through my creations. So going back to the idea of creating outside of the realm of work or what you might consider work. And then we can get into the idea of, do you feel comfortable communicating your creative ideas with others? And the idea, if you feel comfortable speaking in front of groups, which could be also deemed as an act of creativity or expression towards creativity.
Yeah, do
So
you
if we,
find that that helps you kind of unlock new things, Nick, when you talk in front of other people?
now it does, yes. So that's a
Right.
great question, Ian. I think that for the longest time, there were parts of when I spoke in front of a large audience or group that I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable about that expression until I actually started to challenge the way that I was presenting. So I know that you would relate to this. My main form of presentation for a number of years and still is demoing software. So you want to know your way around Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro or Avid, I would do that right
After
now.
Effects.
or After Effects or motion exactly for you, no problem. And you'd be able to present. And in some cases, the main form of the speaker in that room, to me, or this is how I pictured it, was the actual screen, the application. So I didn't feel front and center in terms of the stage, you know? So I think there was a form of that in terms of speaking in front of groups, which I hid behind. I hid behind the software. And it wasn't until I started to challenge myself slowly through presenting in a keynote fashion that I really started to get the benefits of speaking more comfortably in front of groups, expressing things that I'm passionate about in other realms beyond just how to button push in some ways. So that was, I know that's a long answer, Ian, but that's kind of my own personal journey with it. Um, I do want to kind of get back to the questions. So we're going to save a little bit of room of time at the end for 12:45, but I do have a few more slides to get through. So I wanted to just say thank you guys so much for those of you who did participate in that. And I hope that you were able to walk away with something in terms of looking at your own creativity. I love this idea, which is to, if you're feeling out of time, to do things, slow things down a bit. So I was chatting with Ian before, and I think anyone in graphic design or video editing or motion graphics might relate to this. A common term in video editing is that the project was due yesterday, especially in broadcast. Like everything is due yesterday, like this project yesterday, that project was due yesterday, this next project is due yesterday. And I get the idea that everything is sort of on a timeline, but I think it's important to point out that that goal of a project being due yesterday is unachievable. So what you do is you instill to a bunch of people something that they will never be able to catch. And if they're never able to catch it and they're never able to catch up, you're constantly out of time, this feeling of being out of time and not having control over time. The way, this is a personal thing that I have been able to find more time is by slowing things down. And while I don't think I'll necessarily be able to change that idea or that philosophy of broadcasters or even people who put together large projects or feature films, I can change the way that I approach these projects. I can tell myself that I will never be able to realistically catch up to this demand, and that by carving some of that time back for myself, I've actually become more productive in the hours that I do spend on these projects. This never made sense to me when you're in the middle of a deadline. And in many cases, in the middle of a deadline, this is a very hard thing to say, again, through my own personal experience. But for the times that I have done this and slowed things down and carved some time back for myself, the benefits in terms of productivity and that feeling of being in control of time has helped tremendously towards creativity. I think the idea of giving yourself room to be creative is important too. So just a few ideas on this thought is what type of environment do you create in? Like, how is your room where you do the majority of your creations? Are you inspired by it? Room equals time, giving yourself time for your ventures. I've started to use this. I use this in the presentation very similar to this, which was about the creative manifesto, but I think that these ideas equally apply to uncertain times. This idea is that if you're about to go on a new venture, give yourself a time tax. So this is like a contingency in feature films. That would be the best parallel, where most feature films back in the day would have like 15 or 20% that they would have extra for when stuff went wrong. And it went wrong, so they always use that contingency budget. So that same idea though with your new time ventures, like you don't know the process that you're about to embark in. So for you to take the time that you think it's going to take and then multiply that, my current suggestion is to multiply that by 4 to start and then slowly multiply it by less as you go through that process to add a time tax to all of your new ideas. so that when it comes down to completing them, they become more realistic and you're trying to fit this inside.
Nick, I got to jump in on that one real
Yeah.
quick. I learned that at a very young age when I was first starting out in design. I had a producer that I'd work with, and she would say, how long do you think it's going to take you? And I would say, oh, I'll have it ready on Friday. And she'd go, okay, great. And then I'd, go out, hang out with her after and say, oh yeah, so that project, when did you tell the client it's going to be ready? And she said, oh, next Friday. Like, she would just automatically add a week to whatever it was, or 3 days to whatever it was. I mean, if it was small, she would add a couple hours, but inevitably it was gold, because as a creative, of course, eventually there's going to be that time where you're really up against the clock. So it works for project management as well as just your creativity in general.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And it probably explains the reason why, like, sometimes we'll hand clients like work that, there's an automatic need for it. It's like due today, but then they'll sit on it for a week because have already anticipated a week for you to potentially be late with the project.
We don't want to be late.
Yeah, you don't want to be late. When we talk about time, I think that when you look at what times you work, like which hours are you the most creative? So for me, I work best in the morning. Like, I am someone, if I can hit the desk at 6 o'clock running, and my best hours are between 6 and 11. I produce so much in that time period compared to, let's say, at 2 or 4 o'clock. It's ridiculous. Like, I have an afternoon lull where I'm just not as productive. Same thing with the evening. I kind of tune out because I'm looking forward to the next show of Loki that's on Disney. And I know that you can watch it earlier in the day, but that's what I usually would watch, a TV show like on Marvel. But these are my best hours as well, just because there are less distractions, like less emails coming in. So for me to focus on longer form projects, I've just found a comfortability with those morning hours. And I will try to devote and carve out time to do my work during that time.
Yeah, Nick, for me, it was the opposite for many years, especially if I was battling, like, just being anxious about the project.
Yeah.
I would just kind of hang out until I could finally calm down enough, and then all of a sudden it would be like 9 o'clock at night. The idea would hit me, and then I'd look up and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I've just blazed through a whole bunch of stuff. Now, of course, since I'm a young buck now, that's transferring to the mornings as well. But definitely make sure to see what works best for you, and what worked best for you in the past may not necessarily work best for you now. So, kind of try and pay attention to your productivity levels as you're trying to push things through.
Totally. It's going to shift, and those hours might change depending on the other things that are going on in your life.
Yep.
I love this statement. It's finding a safe place to learn, well, fail. I think that there's, of course, a connotation that comes with failure. No one wants failure. So in some cases, we try to avoid the feelings behind what might be associated with failure. In my personal experience, failure when it comes to creativity is inevitable. And in this modern day age, I think even in the way that companies function, as well as the amount of content that people produce, failure is a little bit more recognized, and being able to share and grow with your work because you've shared it is a little bit more accepted. With that said, I think that the idea of finding a place that's safe where you can fail or learn is important. So if you have a project or a new venture where you need a lot of positive reinforcement before you go on, you might want to find someone whose ear you trust and share that idea with them. So reserve it for a small group of people, and even go so far to tell them what you need from them at this stage in a project. Not to say to deny the idea of criticism along the way, but this could be a reinforcement for you in order to go forward and move with your project. A safe space to fail might be just sharing your work with a few people before you share with a larger group or audience where you wouldn't necessarily like the outcome for what you're trying out. And then finding and then learning along the way from these steps of things that did and didn't work, I think is extremely helpful. Uh, with that said, I wouldn't be here presenting in front of you today, this keynote, if I hadn't failed during presentations at least 100 times. And, anywhere from computer software crashing beyond my control to not being ready for a presentation in certain cases, all of this has led to us here today, or me here today with you. Another little point here about room, which is the idea of a reactionary workflow. This kind of comes up when you're feeling out of time. The idea is that you react to your work in a way where almost like you're going about it and your productivity isn't up to par, meaning the hours that you're spending on the work are reactionary towards something that's going wrong. And it might actually be better for you to step away from a project versus react and try to finish it or catch up with something. There can be a lot of trying to avoid reacting to a workflow and stepping away from that project to gain new insight. Just checking the time here. Quickly mention, develop techniques to fight your own resistance. Now, there's definitely going to be times and days where you're not going to feel like doing creative work or being creative. And how can you go about noting these things of your own resistance and finding ways to outsmart that resistance? I'm going to give you one idea if you have too much, or actually two ideas. Now, if you have too much on your plate, so a lot of projects unactioned over even, let's say, several years, you might draw some consideration to letting go of those projects completely.
Yeah, somebody mentioned that in the chat earlier for sure.
Yeah, like let go of the things that are no longer, or they're taking up space in your life, and your time is better spent served on the things that you're currently working on now. Another thing about this, I love this because I've done this so many times, especially in my past. If you've procrastinated until 3 p.m. and have to finish a 4-hour project, commit to 10 minutes. So the idea here is that, 3 p.m., if you're like on TikTok, or my new favorite thing on Facebook right now is this thing called awkward puppets. So I'll watch these 3-minute videos of puppets there. It's hilarious. But if you spent, for any reason, you've just got sucked into that internet thread or chain of social media or whatever it is that has distracted you, and now it's 3 p.m. and you feel like, oh my gosh, I was supposed to do that 4-hour project. It's not going to happen today. I'm not going to get 4 hours done in 2 hours. So I'm just going to surrender to the day. Instead, just go, I'm going to commit to 10 minutes. Every single time that I've done this, it's always more than 10 minutes. And the best part about it is it's 10 minutes less than the work that you have to do tomorrow. You're going to feel better about, although you haven't completely completed the 4-hour project you set out for yourself, you've started or actioned the journey so that it's less heavy on you tomorrow. Idea of making it achievable by breaking up your project into manageable steps. This is something I do quite a bit on long form projects, where I won't try to finish the project all in one sitting. In fact, my brain seems to love the idea of working on long form projects, but in little chunks throughout different weeks, where I'll commit to like a 1-hour or 2-hour period. And I even mentioned during this presentation, a certain amount of time was committed to every single day in order to put these slides together, rather than trying to do that all in one sitting. We've talked about that idea of releasing a project.
Hey, Nick, I just wanted to jump in with that.
Yeah, totally.
When sometimes this happens to me creatively, I've got a list and I'll list out all the things that I want to get done. And all of a sudden I've got a list of 50 things or 100 things. And then it induces a panic attack. And then I start staring at my watch, and then it's just way too much.
Uh-huh.
If you ever find things like that, then categorize whatever the things are, and then basically make smaller lists that are kind of sub lists to your main list, and then commit to getting through the smaller list. So, and I'll actually write those on a separate page. So I don't see the page that has like 100 things on it. I only see the
Yeah.
page of the 10 things that I committed to. And I know if I get through those, eventually I'll get through all the other 100. But if that's something that you battle, definitely don't panic. It's fine to write everything completely out. Just, go with the flow. If it's too much, it's too much. And then
Oh,
take whatever it is and make a separate page, and give yourself that space. I'm literally giving myself space on a new page to show
that
that, it's not that much.
that's such a great idea, Ian. And I just want to add to what you were saying there, because I do something similar where I'll break things into more achievable, smaller steps. But there's something else I'll do as well. When I have like a list of like 100 things to do and that anxiety train, starts rolling in my head, what I'll do is I'll look at that list that I've sort of brain dumped on myself and go, okay, what can you do in 2 minutes? And I'll literally, in that span, get rid of as much that I can get done in 2 to 5 minutes as possible, um, because it actually gives me confidence for the larger tasks. It's like a clearing of a bunch of these things that are, taking up room in your head, but you're able to execute it.
Yeah, I'm reading everybody's comments in the chat, and it's gold. So if you're not paying attention to the chat, pop it open and look at everybody's comments. It's
I totally have not looked at any of these comments. I've been like just trying to get through these slides to
yeah.
get out this information. And you have a
I'll
great,
jump in.
yeah.
I'll jump in on this slide. Long story short, scientists have actually proven, and professors have proven that walks in nature actually are good for your physical and mental well-being. It's been proven to reduce your stress hormone production and actually improve feelings of happiness and free up creativity. So a lot of times, even when I was in the city, I would just try and go find a park or something that I could actually go walk in. If I'm stuck, I will literally go find a forest somewhere and sit there and eat a sandwich. But a lot of people get disconnected from that. And it's been proven now that it actually makes a huge difference.
Very
All
cool.
right.
Let me get to the, oh, this is, this was in line with one of the earlier comments about finding a safe place to fail. This idea of a quote from Berkeley, a philosopher, which is, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? So let's just replace that word. And this was done also in David Usher's book, Let the Elephants Run Wild, Let the Elephants Run Wild, which is, if an idea falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? All those ideas that are currently in your head that you might not have expressed to someone or found that voice to do it, it's, I think, important to have a small expression of those ideas so that people are able to hear those ideas. Because I have a course coming out by the same name, and the name of the topic is called All These Ideas That You Have in Your Head That No One's Ever Heard of. Is there such a thing as too many Post-its? I love it. Thanks, Jay. I really appreciate that. And I do want to open up the floor in the next couple minutes, because we only have 6 minutes left.
Yep.
Just a few more slides to go through. And by the way, my deck is available to everyone, Ian and I's deck. Feel free just to email us after with our contact information. I'm going to be talking more about technology and tapping into the power or balancing that with life. But I think it's important to also, tap into the power of the technology that you carry around with you all the time, your mobile phone, and how many apps exist there for creativity, whether or not you're connected to the internet. One of my favorites is actually right here, which is Adobe Color. Fantastic app where you can take a picture. It's going to give you a color hue, and that's going to work in several Adobe applications.
I use Adobe Capture all the time. That's another great one.
Yeah, and that syncs up with Adobe Premiere in terms of grabbing some color. Oh yeah, Capture's like several apps at once now.
Yeah, yeah. And it
Yeah,
all syncs to your library. So when you get back to your computer, it's all kind of there. It's amazing stuff.
yeah,
But yeah, with that power comes responsibility,
yeah.
right,
It's
Nick?
like the idea of exactly where you can use your phone to capture images, assist with production, take notes, even use mind maps and have that sync up to your desktop computer. But the same point in time is your phone, depending on how you have your notifications set, can also be the um, distraction that
Distraction.
you don't need. So how can you manage those distractions by turning off notifications from apps, deleting apps, uh, walking away from Wi-Fi if you can, and deleting what's not serving you?
For sure.
So I had a few more slides tapping into your inner child, the idea of this concept called free writing for creativity, which is where you can sit with yourself for 10 minutes and write without judgment. So the idea is that you start a clock, it can be 10 to 20 minutes, just write whatever on your mind. And from this free write, depending on the creative project you're working on, you can draw keywords from it that you can then use to find parallels between different things that you're feeling and are inspiring you, and then use these keywords to help draw or create ideas from it. And it's just a great thing because if you practice this idea of free write, it can be a judgment-free zone in terms of an expression. All you need is a clock and a piece of paper and a pen.
Willisha had a great comment in the chat about a Chrome extension called News Eradicator that basically it
Ooh.
blocks timelines of Facebook and Twitter and replaces them with motivational quotes. I think that's brilliant.
That is great. I've never heard of that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Walisha.
And that
That's
actually
awesome. Yeah.
goes right into the slide.
Yeah, that goes right into the slide. So I'm gonna have to I'm taking a screenshot right now as we speak, just so I have this up on my screen. That's awesome. Um, just my last slide, which is this idea of embracing the shake. If you haven't seen this TED Talk, it's from someone by the name of Phil Hansen. He's also spoken on the Adobe stage, and his story is just incredible. After university, he developed a shake in his hand and was unable to produce the type of artwork that he loved. After a few years where he struggled with the fact that he couldn't create this art, he decided to embrace that shake and now creates this crazy, incredible, beautiful artwork where his shake is at the center of the artwork. I have a photo of it in my bathroom downstairs where he sat on the phone with a number of different people and asked them to share one of the things they were feeling, and created this mural or self-reflection of a person. And it, I just love the story. So you should totally check it out. And like usual, we just have 2 minutes for a little bit of a chat, but we really do hope that you guys have enjoyed.
Nick, why don't you put up our
Presentation.
contact info so that, yeah,
You
there we go.
you read my mind, man.
Yeah,
His
excellent.
Felicia, his name is Phil Hansen, and the name of the TED Talk, I believe, if you just type in "embrace the shake," I'll put that there in the chat in a second when I stop sharing my screen. You can totally check it out. But we have 2 minutes. I say we maybe open up the microphones for a few questions. What do you think, Ian?
Yeah, man, do it up.
Yeah. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to speak up now. Also, you can reach us via email. And if you would like a free course on Creative 111, go ahead and just shoot us an email just for you all. So please feel free to email us and I will get you a code to get you a free course on Creative 111 as a thank you.
I just wanted to thank you guys for a great presentation. Gave me a lot of really good ideas.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I only have one thing, and I don't know if we have time to answer it, but I'll throw it out there anyways. When I was doing the your survey or the questionnaire, there were some of them where I said sometimes I do it, and so it wasn't binary. So I wanted to know, what you thought about that, right? Because the questionnaire is binary, yes or no. Do I do this? Do I not do this? And the answer is sometimes, and it depends on my life load, you know, how under the snowball I am. So quick thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, my thought on that is that's totally perfect. And you followed it up the way that I would have followed it up. What are the variables that are making it not black or white, which is totally fine. A lot of life is not yes or no. So that's a great way to break it down. It's just look at what are the variables. And then you could use maybe some of the other exercises that we had to kind of get yourself out from under the snowball, if that's the case. What do you think, Nick?
I totally agree with that. I think that maybe is very human, Jay. You know, I think that's maybe it is, or sometimes is very human in terms of that approach to that question. And to me, it actually leads more in some cases to a yes, because you do take part in these activities, but you might not be doing it as consistent as you like. So to me, it actually leads more towards a yes on that question front. That's what I think.
That's a great insight. So it's about, if you haven't in a while and you miss it, how can you take the time to bring back into your life what you used to do, right? Or want to do.
Yeah.
Sure. Definitely.
Yeah, great insight, guys. Thank you so much. You guys did a fantastic job today.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
attending, Jay. We really appreciate it.